I had always dreamed of visiting New York City. I had seen it in movies and read about it in books. But the idea of experiencing it firsthand was something else entirely. The towering skyscrapers, the bright lights of Times Square, the bustling streets, everything about New York seemed larger than life. So, when my parents told me that we were taking a trip to New York for a long weekend, I could hardly believe it. My excitement was through the roof. I spent weeks planning what I wanted to see and do, counting down the days until we left. Finally, the day arrived. It was a chilly autumn morning when we left our house, suitcases in tow. I could feel the crispness in the air, the kind that lets you know winter is just around the corner. As we drove to the airport, my mind was already racing with anticipation. What would it be like to stand in the middle of Times Square? Would the Statue of Liberty be as magnificent in person as it looked in the pictures? My parents tried to calm me down, but I was buzzing with excitement. The flight to New York wasn't long, but every minute felt like an eternity. I stared out the window, trying to catch a glimpse of the city as we approached. Finally, I saw it, the iconic skyline with its towering buildings stretching up toward the sky. It was even more breathtaking than I had imagined. I could hardly wait to land and step foot in the city that never sleeps. As soon as we landed at JFK Airport, the energy of New York City hit me. There was a hum in the air, a sense of constant movement and possibility. After grabbing our bags, we took a cab into Manhattan, and I couldn't peel my eyes away from the window. The skyline grew closer with every minute, and soon we were surrounded by towering buildings, honking cars, and people walking briskly in every direction. Our hotel was located in Midtown, just a few blocks from Times Square. As we checked in, I could feel the city's pulse even from inside the lobby. The moment we dropped off our luggage in the room, I insisted that we head out to explore. I didn't want to waste a single second of my time in New York. The first stop on our agenda? Times Square, of course. I had seen countless pictures of the flashing billboards and massive screens, but nothing could have prepared me for the real thing. When we turned the corner and stepped into the heart of Times Square, I was awestruck. The lights were blinding, the signs flashing brightly above us, as if trying to outdo each other. People were everywhere, taking photos, shopping, and simply standing in awe, much like I was. We spent some time wandering around, snapping photos and soaking in the electric atmosphere. Street performers danced and played music on the sidewalks, and the sheer energy of the place was intoxicating. I felt like I could stay there forever. But there was so much more of the city to see. The next morning, we decided to take it a little slower and explore Central Park. The park was like an oasis in the middle of the concrete jungle. As soon as we entered, the sounds of honking cars and busy streets faded, replaced by the peaceful rustling of leaves and the distant hum of people enjoying a beautiful fall day. The trees were beginning to turn shades of red, orange, and yellow, and it was like walking through a postcard. We rented bicycles to explore more of the park. As we pedaled along the paths, we passed by famous landmarks like the Bethesda Fountain and the iconic Bow Bridge. I had read about these spots before, but seeing them in person was something special. We stopped by the lake, where people were rowing boats, and I sat on a bench to take it all in. The city felt so far away, even though I knew it was just outside the park's boundaries. After a leisurely ride, we stopped for a picnic. My mom had packed sandwiches, and we found a quiet spot near Sheep Meadow to sit and eat. As we relaxed, I couldn't help but marvel at how different Central Park was from the rest of New York City. It was calm, peaceful, and full of nature. Yet just a few blocks away was the hustle and bustle of one of the busiest cities in the world. No trip to New York would be complete without seeing the Statue of Liberty. So that's where we headed next. We took a ferry from Battery Park, and as we sailed across the harbor, the wind whipped through my hair. The Statue of Liberty grew larger and larger as we approached, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This statue was more than just a tourist attraction. It was a symbol of freedom and hope for so many people. When we docked on Liberty Island, We spent some time walking around the base of the statue. The view of the Manhattan skyline from the island was incredible. The towering buildings looked even more majestic from a distance, framed by the sparkling water of the harbor. We took the audio tour, which explained the history of the statue and what it had meant to immigrants arriving in America. It was fascinating to think about all the people who had passed through here, looking up at Lady Liberty as their first glimpse of a new life. Afterward, we took the ferry to Ellis Island, where millions of immigrants had once passed through on their way to America. The Ellis Island Immigration Museum was full of stories, artifacts, and photos from the people who had come through its doors. Walking through the halls, I tried to imagine what it must have been like to arrive here, full of hope and uncertainty. It made me appreciate how diverse and rich the history of New York City is, built by people from all over the world. As the sun began to set, we made our way to another famous New York landmark, the Empire State Building. I had been looking forward to this all day. I wanted to see the city from above, to get a bird's eye view of the streets and buildings that had been surrounding us since we arrived. When we got to the top, the view was everything I had hoped for and more. The entire city stretched out before us, illuminated by the glow of street lights and the soft colors of the setting sun. I could see Central Park, the Statue of Liberty, the Brooklyn Bridge, and the endless rows of skyscrapers that made up Manhattan. The wind was cold up there, but I didn't care. I was too busy trying to take it all in. The city looked different from up high. It was still busy and bustling, but from that height, it seemed quieter, almost peaceful. I stayed at the railing for a long time, just watching the lights twinkle below. It was one of those moments I knew I would remember forever. One of the things I had been most excited about for our trip was seeing a Broadway show. I've always loved theater, and New York is famous for its world-class productions. We had tickets to see a popular musical, and I couldn't wait. As we walked into the theater that evening, the excitement was palpable. The grand chandelier, the velvet seats, the buzz of the audience, it all felt magical. When the lights dimmed and the curtain rose, I was completely mesmerized. The music, the acting, the costumes, everything was perfect. I was swept up in the story, and for those 2 hours, I forgot about everything else. After the show, we walked through the theater district, where the bright lights of Broadway lit up the streets. It felt like a dream, walking among the theaters where some of the most famous plays and musicals had been performed. I promised myself that one day, I'd come back and see another show. The next day was our last in New York, and I already felt sad knowing I'd have to leave. We spent the morning walking through some of the neighborhoods we hadn't explored yet, like Soho and Greenwich Village. These areas had a different vibe from the rest of the city, more laid back, with cute cafes and unique shops. I loved the charm of the cobblestone streets and the old brick buildings. For lunch, we stopped at a classic New York deli and ordered huge sandwiches. I got a pastrami on rye, which was delicious and bigger than my head. It was the perfect way to end our trip enjoying one of New York's famous foods. As we headed back to the airport, I looked out the window, watching the city fade into the distance. My time in New York had been everything I hoped for and more. I had fallen in love with the city, the energy, the culture, the history. I knew that this wouldn't be my last trip to New York. In fact, I was already dreaming about when I could come back. For now, though, I had a suitcase full of memories and a heart full of excitement. New York City had lived up to every expectation, and I couldn't wait to tell everyone back home all about my adventure in the Big Apple.